Have you ever felt, in the quiet moments of life, that the people around you are not merely passing through? That some encounters seem deliberate, charged with meaning you cannot yet name? Perhaps a stranger's words linger in your mind for days. A sibling's presence awakens feelings long buried, or a friend's betrayal echoes an old pain you thought you had left behind. You may ask yourself, why do these people appear in my life? Why do some bring ease, some demand effort, and some ignite suffering that feels almost unbearable? From the Buddha's perspective, life is never entirely accidental. Every person, every relationship, every moment of friction or ease reflects a complex interplay of causes and conditions. An unseen architecture of karma weaves through your days, shaping experiences and drawing forth lessons you are ready, or not yet ready, to meet. These are the threads that bind consciousness to consciousness, patterns of past intentions and circumstances manifested in the present. Yet these threads are invisible. They cannot be measured, controlled, or fully understood by the ordinary mind. You may feel their tug as tension, longing, or discomfort. You may wonder why, despite your best intentions, certain relationships strain and fracture, while others flow effortlessly. The Buddha teaches that these experiences are mirrors not of the other, but of yourself. They reveal attachment, aversion, expectation, patience, and clarity. They offer the opportunity for insight, if only you pause and perceive with attention. Even situations that feel unfair or painful arise from conditions. Buddhism frames such experiences not as moral punishment, but as the convergence of circumstances, societal factors, and karmic seeds from the continuum of consciousness in previous lives. These moments carry challenge, but also potential for growth, learning, and awakening. In the moments that follow, you will learn to see these threads. You will begin to discern the nature of the bonds that shape your life, to recognize which relationships carry harmony, which carry obligation, and which carry the weight of unresolved patterns demanding transformation. In seeing clearly, you begin to act wisely. In acting wisely, the unseen threads can become instruments of liberation rather than sources of entanglement. Understanding karmic relationships in Buddhism. Relationships are rarely random. From the Buddha's perspective, the people you encounter, the friends who uplift, the colleagues who challenge, the family members who provoke both love and frustration are the ripening of conditions set long ago. Every interaction is a meeting point of past intentions, present awareness, and unfolding circumstances. In Buddhist terms, this is the dance of karma and dependent origination, paticca samuppada. Karma is often misunderstood as punishment or reward, but the Buddha taught it is far subtler. It is cause and effect arising from intention. Every thought, word, and action plants seeds. These seeds do not remain dormant. They influence the conditions of life, shaping the people who appear, the situations that arise, and the challenges that compel reflection. Importantly, these conditions are not moral judgments. They are the natural unfolding of causes, including previous actions, societal and relational factors, and interconnected circumstances. When someone irritates, betrays, or disappoints you, it is not merely external. It is a mirror revealing the contours of your own mind, your attachments, expectations, and habitual patterns. Dependent origination offers insight into why relationships carry both pleasure and pain. Because actions and conditions are interconnected, one act sets off a chain of consequences. A kind gesture in the past may bear the fruit of a supportive friendship today. Unmindful words from long ago may manifest as recurring tension with a sibling, colleague, or partner. The Buddha's wisdom teaches that suffering is rarely arbitrary. It arises in conjunction with conditions that are both external and internal, visible and unseen. Yet recognition alone is not enough. Awareness is the first step, but the heart must also engage. When you encounter difficult people, observe the arising of tension within you. Notice attachment, aversion, and expectation. Ask not how to change the other, but what the encounter reveals about the mind you inhabit and how you can transform yourself in response. This is the path the Buddha illuminates, seeing clearly, understanding deeply, and responding with wisdom rather than habitual reaction. In this light, every person who enters your life becomes a teacher. Some teach ease, revealing the fruit of harmonious conditions and past wholesome actions. Some teach responsibility, showing where attention, patience, or right action is needed. Others reveal the importance of setting wise boundaries and the lesson of letting go. And some, through discomfort or conflict, illuminate unresolved patterns within your mind, offering opportunities to cultivate insight, equanimity, and liberation. Understanding this foundation allows you to approach relationships not as burdens or accidents, but as opportunities to cultivate awareness and transform consciousness. The unseen threads are neither punishment nor reward. They are the canvas upon which the mind learns its own nature. In discerning these threads, you step into clarity, meeting life with the depth of perception the Buddha intended: alert, reflective, and compassionate. The three types of karmic bonds. The Buddha observed that the relationships in your life arise from causes and conditions, some visible, many subtle. By contemplating these bonds, it becomes possible to discern the patterns of mind and the interplay of karma that underlie each encounter. Broadly, these bonds can be understood in three ways: those that bring ease and harmony, those that call for effort or responsibility, and those that challenge profoundly, sometimes painfully. The first, favorable karmic bonds, arise from harmonious conditions, often reflecting past meritorious actions, mutual goodwill, and supportive circumstances. These are the connections where understanding, care, and joy flow naturally, requiring little effort to maintain. The second, karmic obligation bonds, emerge when ongoing conditions, responsibilities, or unresolved relational patterns call for careful attention. They are relationships that demand patience, reflection, and skillful engagement, sometimes involving discomfort or emotional labor. The third, painful karmic bonds, are the most challenging. They confront you with habitual tendencies, deep-seated patterns of mind, and unexamined attachment. They are neither punishment nor accident, but mirrors, sometimes sharp, revealing what the mind has yet to see, inviting transformation through insight and equanimity. Knowing which bond you encounter is not an intellectual exercise. It is the foundation for wisdom in action, allowing responses that preserve awareness and cultivate understanding, rather than reaction, resentment, or habit. Each type of bond carries both lesson and opportunity, and together they map the invisible architecture of your relational life. Favorable karmic bonds, the flow of ripened merit. Some relationships enter life as though the heart itself recognizes them, as if the mind quietly senses a harmony that aligns naturally. A child leans into a parent's guidance not from fear, but from repeated experience of care and attention. A spouse responds with patience in moments of irritation, sensing the unspoken currents of emotion. A sibling offers support without expectation. A friend stands quietly, reliably, as if presence alone suffices. These relationships are not accidents of circumstance, nor are they the product of effort applied solely in the present moment. They are the flowering of conditions shaped by wholesome attention, kindness, and care cultivated over time, both within oneself and in interaction with others. The Buddha taught that intentional acts of generosity, dana, patience, khanti, and ethical conduct, sala, cultivate conditions that naturally bring harmony, understanding, and alignment in relationships. In one of his key teachings for everyday life, the Sigalovada Sutta, he emphasizes that right action, mutual respect, and attentiveness among family, friends, and partners sow seeds that grow into lasting trust and affection. In such relationships, the mind experiences ease not because the external conditions are perfect, but because the inner field has been prepared over time, ready to recognize a bond aligned with virtue kusala. Yet even these harmonious connections conceal subtle instruction. Ease is not absence of teaching. It is an invitation to observe the mind in its natural attunement. The joy flowing between a parent and child, the quiet reassurance of a trusted partner, the effortless laughter shared with a sibling, the silent fidelity of a friend, all reflect the equilibrium of care and virtue. At the same time, they illuminate subtle tendencies within consciousness. A child receiving unconditional support may unconsciously take it for granted. A spouse may unknowingly cling to security offered. A sibling may expect consistency without recognition. A friend may assume presence without attention. Desire quietly arises, unobserved, alongside gratitude, reminding the mind that even comfort carries potential for subtle attachment. To perceive these bonds clearly is to recognize their dual character. They are both blessings and instruments for cultivation. The mind learns generosity, not as a transactional act, but as refinement of being. It learns attention, not as discipline, but as natural attunement to the arising and passing of shared experience. Gratitude becomes not a fleeting emotion, but a way of seeing, noticing the threads of care that extend beyond the visible moment. The Buddha emphasizes that virtuous conditions do more than create pleasure. They shape a context in which the mind may awaken to its own nature, where insight emerges gently within the flow of ordinary life. Favorable bonds are also mirrors revealing the interplay of freedom and subtle attachment. A parent's care, a child's trust, a partner's quiet support, a sibling's consistent presence. These are not merely comfort, but a reflection of ethical attention and conscious alignment. They allow the mind to observe how attachment may arise even in ease, how desire can take root even amid generosity, how contentment can coexist with subtle craving. Awareness here does not diminish joy. It deepens it, creating a resonance in which presence, appreciation, and discernment co-arise naturally. Wise attention to experience at its root reveals the mind's patterns without the need for struggle, providing an inner mirror in which harmony itself becomes a teacher. Thus, favorable karmic bonds are living proof of careful attention and cultivation of virtue. They are the ground upon which consciousness may walk with clarity. They are blessings that simultaneously invite subtle cultivation of the mind. In their quiet presence, one learns that even harmony carries instruction. The heart experiences joy without clinging, gratitude without expectation, and love without the shadow of possessiveness. The Buddha's teaching is clear. What seems effortless is not devoid of meaning. It is fertile ground for insight, a space in which the mind may awaken gently to the fruits of ethical action and the subtle perfection of relational alignment. In such bonds, one tastes the quiet satisfaction of life, guided by ethical refinement, insight, and the harmonious interplay of conditions both past and present. Karmic obligation bonds, the weight of unfinished patterns. Some relationships carry gravity that cannot be ignored. They press upon the heart with the subtle weight of expectation, duty, or unfinished history. A parent whose disappointment lingers in silence. A child whose needs demand constant attention. A spouse whose dependence or insistence awakens latent tension. A sibling who reopens old wounds with familiar words. These encounters are not mere accidents of circumstance. They arise from the natural unfolding of past interactions, habitual patterns, and relational dynamics, calling the mind to meet them with deliberate attention. The Buddha taught that suffering arises not solely from external conditions, but from the mind's response to them. In these bonds, you encounter attachment, habitual reactivity, and subtle craving most vividly. The parent who expects unwavering loyalty mirrors the child's unexamined desire for approval. The child who resists guidance reflects patterns of expectation and habit. The spouse whose demand for affirmation triggers anxiety awakens latent vulnerabilities. The sibling who repeats criticism illuminates hidden pride or defensiveness. And the person who clings, plays the victim, or constantly relies on others exposes dependency and unresolved craving within the mind. Each interaction is a tapestry of interwoven conditions, simultaneously challenging and offering opportunity. Engagement in these relationships is neither passive endurance nor blind submission. It requires careful discernment, a subtle vigilance of attention that observes the arising of frustration, irritation, or aversion and traces it to its origin within consciousness. The tension is not merely external, it is an invitation to witness how expectation, attachment, and pride shape perception. Each act of care, each measured response, each effort to remain present without reactive indulgence is a choice that shapes not only the immediate bond, but the unfolding of consciousness itself. Here, the laboratory of the mind is alive. Every difficult exchange is a teacher, every irritation, a mirror revealing subtle tendencies that have persisted unnoticed. Karmic obligation is particularly visible within family, yet it also extends to lovers, friends, and even fleeting acquaintances. A partner who leans heavily upon emotional energy exposes the mind's capacity for patience and equanimity. A friend who repeatedly seeks reassurance illuminates latent clinging or expectation. A colleague whose reliance consistently tests composure reveals the hidden architecture of relational patterns. The Buddha emphasizes that the weight of these obligations is not punishment, but instruction. It is the mind's encounter with its own structures, the subtle mirror of ethical, emotional, and psychological maturation. Within these bonds, awareness and insight are indispensable. true responsibility is not the resignation of self into burden, but engagement born of discernment. Patience is refined, generosity is deliberate, and action arises neither from compulsion nor resentment, but from understanding the conditions that give rise to tension. The child who constantly demands attention, the spouse whose insistence awakens old fears, the sibling whose criticisms reopen familiar wounds, all present opportunities to practice clarity, ethical responsiveness, and mindful presence. Each moment carries the potential to transform perceived weight into cultivation of insight, revealing that the bonds themselves are sacred spaces where consciousness may unfold. The Buddha's teachings illuminate a further subtlety. The challenges of obligation are never merely external. The mind, confronted with these relationships, discovers where attachment, craving, and unexamined expectation persist. The tension is a mirror of latent patterns, a reflection of how past interactions continue to shape the present. Each interaction exposes where patience is underdeveloped, where equanimity wavers, where generosity may be too habitual or too conditional. In facing these bonds, the mind learns to act with precision, to respond ethically, and to cultivate a depth of presence that ordinary ease cannot reveal. Even strain itself is a gift. It exposes the hidden architecture of relational patterns, revealing where attention, compassion, and mindfulness have yet to mature. The relationship that demands, that tests, that stretches the heart offers a laboratory for liberation, nibbana. Here, the mind discovers the subtle interplay between duty and freedom, between responsibility and discernment, between engagement and non-attachment. To meet the weight of obligation with conscious presence is to step into freedom within constraint, recognizing that the very pressure felt is the condition for awakening. In these bonds, the Buddha's guidance is clear. They are neither punishment nor burden alone. They are sacred training grounds. They cultivate awareness, refine ethical conduct, and expose the structures of mind that, once observed, may be reshaped. The interplay of expectation and response, of care and reflection, of attachment and conscious attention, becomes the terrain upon which insight, patience, and wisdom unfold. Through these bonds, the mind learns the subtle art of engagement without grasping, presence without compulsion, and care without loss of freedom. Thus, the weight of unfinished patterns is not to be lamented. It is a mirror, a call, a teacher. The Buddha's teaching encourages observation, reflection, and skillful action. In embracing these bonds with awareness, the mind transforms tension into cultivation, difficulty into understanding, and the ordinary act of responding into a practice of liberation. In every expectation, every need, every obligation, there lies the possibility to awaken, to see clearly, to act wisely, and to participate in life without being ensnared by unexamined patterns of mind and relational dynamics. Painful karmic bonds. When suffering becomes teacher, some relationships wound with a precision that cannot be ignored. They stir the heart, unsettle the mind, and leave invisible marks that trace long after the encounter has passed. A parent whose words consistently cut, a child whose defiance awakens tension, a partner whose betrayal pierces trust, a sibling who reopens memories of resentment, or even a stranger whose callousness triggers old insecurities. These encounters are never mere accidents. They emerge from the unfolding of habitual patterns, relational dynamics, and conditions that test the mind's awareness, calling consciousness to confront itself directly. The Buddha taught that suffering is never meaningless. It is a mirror. In painful bonds, the mind encounters its clinging, craving, fear, pride, and unexamined habits most vividly. The parent whose criticism echoes long after spoken words illuminates patterns of expectation and insecurity. The partner whose anger erupts unpredictably exposes latent desires for recognition or control. The sibling whose old grievances resurface uncovers unresolved resentment. Even a fleeting interaction with a stranger may provoke disproportionate reactions, revealing hidden layers of attachment or aversion. These experiences are not punishments, but invitations, opportunities for the mind to observe itself with clarity. Engagement in such bonds demands courage and mindful presence. Reaction, born of habit, only perpetuates suffering. Awareness transforms it into insight. Anger, fear, disappointment, or shame, when observed without identification, become teachers rather than tormentors. The Buddha emphasized that these encounters are opportunities to observe feelings, cultivate mindfulness, and develop insight into the workings of the mind. The mind learns not merely to endure, but to perceive the causes of its own entanglement, to understand the mechanics of craving and clinging, and to witness the arising and passing of sensations, emotions, and thoughts without being consumed. Painful bonds often carry intensity precisely because they expose the deepest and most habitual patterns of mind. Within family, this may be a parent whose rigid expectations awaken anxiety, a child whose persistent need reveals unexamined attachment, or a sibling whose rivalry activates old insecurities. Within romantic relationships, betrayal, disappointment, or dependency uncovers latent desire, expectation, or identification. Even outside intimate circles, a friend's betrayal, a colleague's manipulation, or a stranger's hostility offers the same mirror. The conditions that provoke reaction are rooted in the mind's habitual tendencies, and awareness transforms them into learning opportunities. The Buddha's teaching illuminates that it is not the other who binds, but the unawareness within oneself. The subtle challenge in these relationships lies in the mind's desire for control, the heart's longing for justice, and the ego's insistence on being right. Here, the practice of discernment becomes indispensable. To witness without grasping, to respond without reactivity, and to engage without surrendering freedom. These are the skills that painful bonds cultivate. Boundaries, ethical action, and mindful presence are not retreat. They are instruments through which the mind navigates intensity without being ensnared. Compassion is not indulgence, but wisdom aligned with care. Freedom arises not from altering the other, but from transforming the inner response. Even the most searing interactions carry latent gifts. Each provocation exposes subtle tendencies, the mind's reactivity, the heart's clinging, the ego's pride, and the body's conditioned tension. Observed with insight, these reactions dissolve into learning. Anger becomes a teacher of patience, fear a teacher of courage, grief a teacher of presence, and betrayal a teacher of discernment. Through repeated conscious engagement, the mind reshapes the bond, not by coercion or avoidance, but by steady cultivation of awareness. The intensity remains, but its power to dominate diminishes. The Buddha emphasized that liberation is not the absence of relationships, but the absence of bondage within them. A parent's harshness, a child's defiance, a partner's betrayal, a sibling's resentment, each becomes a canvas for insight when met with mindful observation and ethical action. Suffering is transmuted when craving and clinging are recognized, understood, and allowed to dissipate. The relationship may continue externally, yet internally, freedom arises. The mind dictates its engagement with the relationship rather than being dictated by it. Across all domains, family, lovers, friends, colleagues, strangers, the principle is universal. Wherever consciousness meets consciousness, habitual patterns manifest, and the opportunity for insight is present. Painful bonds illuminate what is normally invisible, the architecture of attachment, the structure of expectation, and the subtle interplay of habitual reactions. They are mirrors of the mind itself, reflecting what is yet to be observed, understood, and released. The reward of engaging wisely with painful bonds is profound. Equanimity arises, compassion is refined, and insight deepens. The mind learns to meet challenge without being consumed, to embrace difficulty without clinging, and to witness the arising and passing of emotion without ownership. Suffering transforms into freedom. The bonds that once wounded now serve as vessels of awakening, revealing the subtle mechanics of consciousness and the art of compassionate, ethical presence. Thus, painful bonds are not enemies, but teachers of the highest order. They compel reflection, cultivate resilience, refine attention, and illuminate the mind's deepest structures. When the mind meets them with awareness, when insight tempers reaction, and mindfulness steadies the heart, the suffering inherent in these relationships is transmuted into liberation. The bond remains, yet its power to bind dissolves. Painful relationships, approached with discernment, become portals through which the mind awakens, mirrors in which consciousness encounters its own freedom, and teachers revealing the depth of human experience in alignment with the Buddha's timeless wisdom. Wherever there is contact, there is karma. The Buddha taught that karma does not discriminate by role, title, or proximity. It is not confined to family, nor reserved only for those closest by blood. Wherever consciousness meets consciousness, the law of cause and condition is already at work. The same patterns that shape the bond between parent and child also arise between lovers, siblings, friends, colleagues, strangers, or even those encountered briefly, yet remembered long after. A single conversation may carry the weight of many unseen causes. A fleeting encounter may stir disproportionate emotion. A relationship that appears insignificant on the surface may unsettle the mind more deeply than long-standing ties. Karmic bonds reveal themselves not by duration or intensity alone, but by the quality of the mind's response, attraction, resistance, obligation, or disturbance. Wherever these arise, karma is already in play. Dependent origination clarifies this. Contact gives rise to feeling. Feeling conditions craving. Craving shapes clinging. Clinging sustains becoming. This sequence unfolds whether the person before you is a parent, lover, colleague, or stranger. The form changes, but the mechanism is consistent. What shifts is the mind's habitual orientation toward the experience. In family relationships, karmic patterns often feel inescapable because continuity, memory, and identity reinforce them. Yet proximity does not intensify karma. Repetition simply makes the patterns more visible. A parent's persistent criticism, a sibling's recurring rivalry, or a child's repeated defiance exposes familiar mental tendencies again and again. Outside the family, similar patterns arise with less permanence but equal impact. A lover may awaken attachment and fear. A friend's betrayal may pierce deeper than a sibling's rivalry. A stranger's contempt may trigger disproportionate anger. What unites these experiences is not the relationship itself, but the structure of mind encountering conditions shaped by prior action and habitual response. Suffering does not originate in the other. It emerges in unexamined reactions. No encounter exists outside the field of practice. Every interaction becomes a site for observation, revealing whether the mind leans toward grasping or clarity, aversion or understanding, confusion or discernment. This universality carries profound implication. Liberation is not reserved for monasteries or solitude. It unfolds in kitchens, bedrooms, workplaces, hospital rooms, family gatherings, and chance encounters. The very people who unsettle, comfort, disappoint, or draw you close are not obstacles to awakening. They are its conditions. Each bond, regardless of form, exposes a particular angle of attachment, expectation, fear, or generosity. To see this clearly is to release the habit of categorizing relationships as important or unimportant, personal or external. Awakening is not selective. Where there is feeling, there's teaching. Where there's reaction, there's material for insight. Where there is suffering, there's the possibility of understanding and ending its hold. Thus, the field of karmic bonds is total. Family and strangers, intimacy and distance, harmony and conflict, all belong to the same unfolding law. The question is never whether karma is present, but whether the mind recognizes what is being revealed, and whether awareness is strong enough to meet it without distortion. In this recognition, the world itself becomes the ground of awakening, and every relationship, without exception, becomes a teacher. What these bonds are asking of the mind. The Buddha did not teach that simply understanding karma is enough. Seeing the pattern is only the beginning. What determines freedom or continued entanglement is how the mind responds once the pattern is revealed. Every karmic bond, whether harmonious, demanding, or painful, asks a single question of consciousness. Will habitual reaction continue the cycle, or will awareness interrupt it? In favorable bonds, the mind is tempted to cling. Comfort gives rise to expectation. Affection may quietly harden into possession. Trust can become fear of loss. Without mindfulness, what began as the fruit of past virtue can become the seed of future tension. Pleasure, when unexamined, binds as firmly as pain. Even love, when grasped, can sustain attachment rather than freedom. In obligation-bound relationships, the mind often leans toward resistance. Duty is mistaken for burden, responsibility for imprisonment. Irritation arises not because care is required, but because the self resists conditions it did not choose. Here, the Buddha points not to escape, but to insight. When resistance is observed rather than indulged, the illusion of a separate, entitled self softens. The mind learns to act without resentment, to serve without erasure, and to engage without being consumed. In painful bonds, the challenge is sharper. The mind seeks someone or something to blame. Withdrawal feels justified. Anger seems convincing. Yet the Buddha's teaching goes deeper. As long as suffering is projected outward, liberation remains inaccessible. Painful relationships demand courage, not the courage to endure harm, but the courage to see clearly what the pain reveals about attachment, fear, identity, and craving. These bonds do not ask for endurance, forgiveness, or tolerance in the ordinary sense. They call for wise attention to experience at its root, rather than reacting habitually. With this attention, the mind no longer asks, "Why is this person doing this to me?" Instead, it observes, "This is how suffering arises, is maintained, and can be released." The shift is subtle, but decisive. The other person does not need to change for insight to arise. The relationship does not need to resolve neatly. What changes is the orientation of consciousness. Reaction gives way to discernment. Compulsion loosens its grip. The bond remains, but its power to wound or bind begins to dissolve. Liberation does not occur by rearranging conditions, but by understanding them. When craving is recognized as craving, aversion as aversion, attachment as attachment, without justification or condemnation, the momentum of karma weakens. What once felt inevitable becomes optional. What once controlled the heart loses authority. Thus, karmic bonds are not obstacles on the path. They are the path. They are the precise points where the mind reveals its habits most clearly. To meet them with awareness is to step out of repetition and into understanding. Seeing them clearly is already the first step in releasing their hold. When clinging masquerades as love, the Buddha did not teach that love is proven by endurance, nor that compassion requires the abandonment of wisdom. Yet the mind often confuses clinging, attachment born of fear, habit, or longing, with care itself. When this confusion takes root, suffering is prolonged, quietly justified, and often mistaken for virtue. Many remain in painful bonds believing they act from love, when in truth, the heart is governed by grasping. A child clings to a parent's approval long after kindness has faded. A parent clings to a child out of fear of loss rather than understanding. A lover remains bound by memory, obligation, or hope for change, mistaking attachment for devotion. The Buddha named this clearly: craving wearing the mask of virtue. True compassion, loving kindness, arises from wisdom that sees conditions as they are. When wisdom is absent, the heart tightens. It stays not because staying is wholesome, but because leaving would expose insecurity, grief, or the collapse of identity. In this way, clinging presents itself as loyalty, and bondage calls itself love. The Buddha was precise in his distinction. Compassion does not mean remaining where unwholesome states are continuously reinforced. It does not mean absorbing another's anger, confusion, or cruelty as a form of merit. When a relationship repeatedly gives rise to greed, aversion, or delusion, continued immersion strengthens those very conditions. To call this compassion is to misunderstand the path. With deepening insight, a quiet shift occurs. The heart begins to experience disenchantment, not bitterness, not rejection, but a natural turning away. What once compelled no longer dominates. The need to fix, to be chosen, to be validated, loosens its grip. This is not indifference. It is the cooling of mental fever. Stepping back, in the Buddha's teaching, is not abandonment. It is non-participation in suffering. It is the refusal to feed patterns that bind both parties. One may still act ethically, speak gently, and wish well, while no longer offering the heart as a battlefield for unresolved karma. Even when a bond continues outwardly, wisdom reshapes its inner structure. Expectations dissolve. Emotional hooks fall away. The other's behavior no longer dictates the state of the mind. This is freedom within relationship, not freedom from relationship. The Buddha taught that liberation does not require hatred nor dramatic severance. It requires clarity. When clinging is seen as clinging, it loses its authority. When love is freed from grasping, compassion becomes light, steady, and unburdened. This is the difference between remaining bound and remaining awake. The bond releases when insight rises. The Buddha taught that karma does not bind forever. It binds only as long as its causes persist. When ignorance gives way to understanding, when reaction is replaced by clarity, the momentum of a karmic bond naturally weakens. Nothing dramatic is required. No declaration, no confrontation, no inner struggle. The bond loosens because the conditions that sustained it, attachment and craving, are no longer present. This release is often subtle, almost imperceptible. Many expect resolution to arrive as apology, reconciliation, or visible change in the other. The Buddha promised something quieter and more profound. When the mind ceases to grasp and clinging dissolves, suffering naturally ends, even if the external form remains unchanged. Freedom arises from within, unforced, effortless, and unclaimed. A relationship may continue outwardly, yet its power diminishes. Words that once wounded no longer lodge in the heart. Behavior that once provoked reaction passes unnoticed. The other has not changed. The bond has. Its karmic charge has thinned because the mind has been met with wisdom and attention. Sometimes the relationship fades naturally, not through hostility, avoidance, or resentment, but through the absence of compulsion. Interest dissolves, expectation loosens, the heart no longer leans forward or recoils. This is not loss, it is completion. The Buddha describes such moments as the arising of freedom, not the erasure of connection, but the ending of bondage within it. In some circumstances, distance becomes necessary. When continued proximity fuels unwholesome states, wisdom recognizes that space preserves clarity. This is not abandonment, it is discernment. The Buddha never equated proximity with virtue. Virtue arises in the weakening of craving, in the cessation of grasping. When a karmic bond has fulfilled its purpose, what remains is neither attachment nor resentment, but quiet goodwill. One can wish the other well without longing, remember without pain, and engage without disturbance. The mind rests in balance, awake to the unfolding of reality. In that release, the heart tastes liberation, not as an abstract concept, but as the lived freedom that comes when insight illuminates the causes of bondage. What remains is simplicity, presence without demand, care without weight, love without fear. In that quiet space, the mind knows, without effort, without proclamation, that it is free. If this wisdom resonates with you, please like this video and subscribe to join us on the path of conscious living.